I wish I could say I'm super excited about what our content is today, but we're going to be talking about Life Check. Kyle and I had a conversation. This was more his idea than mine, but we had a conversation about the tragedy that took place here in Charlotte a couple weeks ago, where you were at the funeral on Monday. Mm-hmm. And we're
four officers.
But,
3 U.S. Marshal Task Force.
Which is super heavy, super horrible. Yeah. But it brought up the reality of making sure your life, is in check. And that's the whole thing that we want to talk about today. Those important areas of your life that are like vital, but you'd never want to bring them up because they
something is going to happen.
Yeah, but you don't want to think about
around it as best I can.
How can I plan for it but never think about it?
Never talk about it.
Yes.
Never talk about it.
And a lot of people, unfortunately, are like, I just want to do this once. Right. And they said it, and they do a great job that one time, and then they never want to talk about it again.
But the thing is, the older you get, like my dad, he's starting to talk about, it's getting there. We need to talk about this, talk about that. But for so many other people, they don't live as long as he does, and you don't ever get to that point where you try to clean up affairs to make it a little bit easier on the survivors.
Yeah. Right. And even beyond like the simple things. So some of the things we're going to talk about today is estate planning, beneficiaries, but then we want to get into, and even lifestyle income and retirement planning. I mean, those are pretty stapled, topics that we'll mention quite often in this office, but then some of the other things that we're going to talk about is accountability and follow through, because in the last two that we're going to talk about is fulfillment and purpose. And in life, we're called to doing different things. We're passionate about doing things. And how are you following through with that? Who's helping you hold you accountable to the goals that you set? So some of the things that we're going to talk about, you want to set and forget, like estate planning or even beneficiary. But life changes. Curveballs come real fast, real hard.
And unfortunately, most of the time that those life changes, they're not happy times or easy times to have conversations because you're bombarded both time-wise and emotion-wise with what you're dealing with. So the last thing you want to do is do paperwork to change that.
Well, and I would even make that more complicated in the fact that nothing triggers like, hey, so-and-so passed away, or we had this situation with our family. We need to update our estate planning documents.
Right. It's not
that just doesn't happen, ever.
Yeah.
We just go, okay, here's the new normal, and we move on, and we never think. And we had a conversation when we're putting this together. I'm like, when we're talking about this first topic, I'm like, oh wait. And I wrote down one of the things we're going to talk about as far as the difference between wills and trusts. I'm like, yeah, wills don't cross state lines, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And he's like, what's that? We're having a more in-depth conversation. I was like, yeah, we moved states a year ago. We live in South Carolina, moved to North Carolina. And he's like, well, did you update your will? And I was like, nope.
Let me go.
The thing is with the will, though, that really comes to mind is when you have kids and the guardianship. What happens if Lori and I both die? Who's going to take care of my son,
Yeah.
And then they age out to the point that they don't need it anymore. But my son just had a baby. Okay, we're looking
back
at it
into it again.
Yeah. Yes.
And you better have that in a row because I don't want to have to fight over my grandkids.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly right.
So let's just jump in. Let's talk about estate planning. What is estate planning? Just in generalities. What's it for? What is it?
Really, I mean, I'm just going to go straight definition here, but it's the process of arranging and preparing and like getting all of these documents ready. Like what happens to everything in your life when you pass. Mm-hmm. And that's housing, bank accounts, cash accounts, your IRAs, kids can sometimes fold into that.
It's the legal following proceedings of what happens when something major happens in your life, like a death or something like that. These estate planning documents make sure that the two most important things, I shouldn't say most important, the two things that are dealt with estate planning documents, which is your assets and your family.
Yep.
Right.
So each document that you have does something different, and we're gonna talk about that. But the importance of having these documents is really going back to what you said earlier. What happens to the guardianship? There's nothing more important to me than my family, right? what happens? Like, I've got 2 kids under 18. I have an 18-year-old, so don't need anything more for him now, you know?
Sorry, bud, you're on your
You're
own.
off the
The only thing that's important to him is our assets at this point. You know, but he's like, I'll take care of myself. How much
Make
money
sure
am I
I'm the
getting?
beneficiary.
Yeah. But on the, guardianship, I have 2 kids, under that 18 that I care who's going to, finish raising them if something happens to me. So, these documents are super important because, some of the conversations we were having putting this together, like, when you have a client like who's like, I don't have an estate planning document, and what would happen to my 2 kids that are under 5, and the reality is, like, a judge.
Right.
If you don't have documents and you've got brothers and sisters on your side, your spouse has brothers and sisters on their side, you've got grandparents, and there's no document for guardianship, who decides? A stranger.
A stranger.
It's going to, so you have all these family members going to come and going, no, I know this, I believe this, his wishes, her wishes, and the judge's going to have to decipher all of that and go, here's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's a bad situation.
Yeah. I mean, and like I look at you just saying that, and like we've talked about it, our personal situation, we don't, outside of my mother-in-law, no one lives in Charlotte, our family. So like, it's a real conversation that my wife and I have been having, like, to go to family, they have to move out of everything that they know.
And they're already going through
like,
the loss of their
what do you
parents,
do?
and then they're moving to leaving their friends.
Yeah.
And,
So to leave that up to a judge is not an option.
No. So, all right, let's talk about the key elements of an estate plan. So you've got wills, or will, or multiple. You can have trusts. There's power of attorney, which is pretty important because and we'll talk about what they are. I just wanted to go right into it. And then healthcare power of attorney. So power of attorney is different than a healthcare power of attorney. And then the last thing, which we're going to get into when we talk about wills, is guardianship designation for minors, which is really what a will is. So let's just jump into actually, before we jump into the differences, let's talk about what they are. So what's a will? Who wants to jump into that? Very simple. Guardianship. Nobody's answering. So a will, most important, is going to take care of the guardianship of your loved ones.
And it almost guarantees your estate's going through probate.
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk about that on the different sides. Wills are very public. There's a lot of pros and cons for each document, but the most important thing to me when I'm looking at a will, it's what's going to happen to my kids that are under adult, that are not adult age. So it's going to take care of that because a trust cannot. Yep. So let's talk about a trust. What is the most important thing that a trust does?
Really informs your assets and where those go.
It kind of gives you control of your assets beyond the grave. You can handle so many what-if scenarios.
Yes.
Oh, my daughter married a guy that I'm not sure if I like that it's going to work out, but they have children now. So if something happens to her and she already has the assets, if it's not identified in a trust, this is how I want it to happen, then you might lose control over.
And like I have a client who has set up to where her kids get the money when she's single, but they don't get it until they're like 30, 35, and 40. Like she doesn't want them getting it immediately if something unfortunately happened to her.
That makes perfect sense.
My trust is exactly the same way, where if my wife and I pass on, there'll be certain amounts of money that are deemed to take care of our kids on a yearly basis. But as far as like big lump sums, there's like, not only is there age brackets, but there's discernment and stipulations by the executor of the trust. Yeah. So, which is a member of the family. And my wife and I had very deep conversations with this particular person about, you understand that we're putting you in a position that you could be hated.
Right.
Like there's a lot of responsibility, and where you're basically going to be put in a position that if you deem X, you're now hated by this person, and they might be making bad decisions, they might be making good decisions, but their life and their decisions is going to affect how the responsibility that you have, and my wishes. So are you okay with that? Like, because sometimes you set people up for failure, but I'm positioning them, that my kids are setting up for failure. Yeah. Because if they make terrible decisions, do turn into a crackhead, do whatever,
Oh, geez.
they're going to be like, no, you can't have this, and that's written in there,
Right.
and they would have the control of being like, I mean, imagine that responsibility, like,
yeah.
oh man,
It's a lot.
that's
for
heavy.
sure.
That's why you only want to have this conversation once.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why you need it, is because try having that
both.
conversation. Yes.
Yeah.
It's,
So to delineate these two, and this is my perspective. I mean, I'm not an attorney. There's other people, but wills is really for guardianship because trust can't do that. So trust cannot determine or tell a judge, hey, this child is going to be taken care of that. What a will cannot say, I want my money managed like X. So these are complementing documents.
Yep.
You
wills
can't
kind
have
of go in action immediately, like right at death.
they're triggered right at death.
Yeah.
Where a trust can happen before, happen after,
Or
it can do
over.
all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So trusts are really financially related and backed, and that's the importance. Where wills are, the wills can do they can dictate directions of stuff, but they can't manage assets. And they're triggered right at death, but they'll just say, I want this to happen on my demise.
And the other big one that you've learned was wills don't transfer states.
Well, I knew that.
Yeah.
I just didn't.
Sure.
Nothing
Yeah.
triggered in my head going, hey, I moved states. I should probably update. And I text Brad this morning, and I was like, hey, I asked the question. I knew the answer, but I was like, should I? And he's like, yeah. And then I texted him back, and I was like, do you know a guy? Brad's an attorney. He helps us out all the time. So let's talk about power of attorney. What is power of attorney? Anybody want to talk about it, the power of attorney? So power of attorney gives the authority for somebody to take care of something specific. Like, let's just say, heaven forbid, somebody in our family, like me and my wife, get incapacitated. We're not dead, but we're in a situation where, I can't pay my own bills.
Right.
And, a power of attorney would give the authority to somebody to come into our estate. Let's say, one of us passes, the other one's incapacitated, or somebody can come in, start writing checks and doing things, take care of, have the power to do things on my behalf because I can't. These are vital. Like a power of attorney gives somebody authority to act in your behalf, specifically on your finances in this regard. The other one, healthcare power of attorney, this one's more scary
I was going to say.
because you're giving somebody the authority to basically say, hey, pull the plug or not.
That's right.
And I actually read an article yesterday morning, might have been this morning, that, days and nights,
I
they
know,
run
I was
together
gonna
these
say.
days. But it was talking about a husband who had to make a tough decision. His wife had given birth and died on the table, giving birth to their child. It was a little baby girl, or maybe it was a third. They had two other kids. And the doctors, she went into a coma state. She died, but then they were able to resuscitate her, but she was in a coma. And then she had no life signs, nothing. And for 2 months, the doctors and everybody was like, you're going to have to pull the plug. She's mentally gone, like just not there. And then one day she just woke up totally back to normal.
Wow.
It was like the
Come on
coolest
now.
story. Like she
Wow,
was
God.
completely back to normal.
Wow.
And just woke up, knew who everybody was right away. Like, there's my little girl, was able to like hold her baby for the first time in 2 months in this situation.
That's
And
unbelievable.
crazy situation.
And this wasn't like one of those crazy news things? This was real?
Well, like
How
a
did-
God thing.
Yeah.
I just read
No,
an
a God
article.
thing, but like
It
that's
might have been. I don't
unbelievable.
know. I didn't look at the date. I don't know how long ago it
Yeah.
was. It just popped up in my newsfeed
That'll give
from
you hope.
the news that I read.
It's just-
But it was, in that situation, and the reason why I'm telling stories, like when you're talking about healthcare power of attorney, there's situations where you're told. Ever watched the movie The Choice?
No.
You've never seen The
No.
Choice?
Is that
Never
a-
even heard it.
I haven't
Sparks? Is that a...
No.
I don't think
The Choice. You need to watch this movie.
Apparently.
You need to watch this
If it-
movie. It's one of my wife and I's favorite movie. I'm not going to get into details with it, but
Just
it's the
don't give it
same
away
type
now.
of
You told everybody to
situation.
watch it.
Same type of situation where this couple that gets together, and I love the movie so much because I resonate with the guy, and my wife resonates with the girl. She's just this stubborn runner.
Easy.
Like she's always running away from him, and he's always chasing her.
Oh.
That is us. And it's their story, and then something happens to her. Situation very similar to this. It's a really, really good movie.
Yeah.
A lot of humor.
So I was going to say,
God,
it doesn't
humor.
sound happy. Is it happy?
Very,
Okay.
very good.
Okay.
And for power of attorney, that is not something that your spouse is just automatically given either.
This is
Right.
official document.
Correct.
Now,
Like,
your
you
spouse-
have to name the spouse, like, because we had a client that spouse died, but the bank account, the checking account was just in his name, and she's having to go through a ton of paperwork to try to get access to those
Sometimes
funds.
you have to have a judge declare that you're going to take care of
So
it.
if,
Right.
if
These
you
things.
are legally married, for specified periods of time, a judge can. But there's a lot of issues that you can go
It's just
through.
not immediately assumed. Yeah.
No.
Because like even whenever Brooke and I bought our last house, I wasn't able to make it to the closing. So she still brings it up how much she dislikes me for that. Because I had to sign over power of attorney to her to sign my name.
Oh, you
But
had
she
to
had
do
to
that too? I did that with Lori. She was not happy.
Yeah. So she signed her name. Then she signed my name and then had to initial by my name
Yeah.
on every
Dated.
single
Yeah.
sheet.
Oh, it's
Love you, babe.
Yeah. But I think that's an interesting point
Yeah.
to make. Like, just because you're married, you have legal documents saying you're married,
Don't make
unless they're
assumptions.
named on those accounts, they may not have access to them.
Yeah. Wasn't that something we would do in our college courses? That certain hospitals, if you didn't have this power of attorney, they had their own. And who did it protect? It
Them.
protected
Them.
the hospital. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to be real careful about making
These
sure
are
you have the right
so
documents.
important. And these, again, these are not a set and forget. Like, you might list a spouse and divorce happens or death happens.
Yeah.
And, something happens to you. And lo and behold, the one person that might hold the keys to your life or death might be somebody you divorced
Right.
10 years ago.
Mhm.
Like there's could be bad situations that you find yourself into. We've got some solutions on how you can trigger different things. But before we get there, let's talk about the differences specifically about wills and trusts or about these documents. So the first one is something that triggered personally for me is we've said this in our college classes years and years ago, and it's true that trusts cross state lines and wills don't. So if you have a trust created in Wyoming, Florida, wherever, whatever state, you can take that document, move all across the country, wherever, and it will always be in play federally. A trust is a federal document that goes across state lines. Wills are not. So when we drafted all of our state documents was when we were living, actually the first time we did it, but it was very simple, it was online, it was up in Michigan. And we moved down here, we hired an attorney, did it all over again. And our wills and trust documents went from like that much to like this much. And then when we were putting this together, I'm like, man, I didn't update my trust. I moved state or my will, I moved states. I'm like, that's important to know because my guardianship now is out of date for my 2 kids.
Right.
And now if something happened to me or my wife, heaven forbid, now my 2 minors would have to be told by a judge
A
who's going
stranger,
to take care
as
of
you
them.
say, a stranger.
Yeah, a stranger.
When you say it like that,
Yeah.
it really
Yeah.
hits home.
So what else? What are some other differences?
So wills really, we said this before, they distribute the assets, they handle the guardianship, and
They
wills
can't manage.
They can't manage it, but it all enacts right at death,
death,
as
right.
well.
Yep.
There's no really information informing the management of assets long term.
What about privacy? Which one's public? Which one's private?
Trusts
Well,
are
will-
private.
And wills are public, yeah.
Yeah. So
You actually had a story about this, John Wayne.
Yeah, I was going to actually just share that. So when we did our classes years ago, I had the document, the trust, I'd hold it up in class, and I'm like,
The will.
Sorry, yeah, the will. I was like, anybody want to know every detail about John Wayne's estate? I was like, he never had a trust. So all he died with a will. So you want to know where every cent he had when he died and where it went to, when and how? It's right here. Public. It's all public. And somebody so famous has made over 200 movies. You can know everything about his financial affairs, which is just crazy to me.
And that can be kind of dangerous too if you do have a lot of money. And now if somebody knows how much money you had
Yeah.
is going to your children. Well,
I can
They
tell
can
you,
Or
work
like
hard.
special
Yeah.
heirlooms,
Yeah.
there's family items that people pass on, and those are going to someone.
A little bit of quarrels.
and I can tell you for $50, you can hire a private investigator and find out anything you want to know about anybody.
it's about right.
What is it, $75 maybe?
Inflation.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be $50, because when we hire somebody around
Yeah.
here, we do background checks. We hired literally PI
Yep.
out of Rock Hill, and they get us whatever we need to know. I think it's 80, might be $80 now. And when we first started, it was 50. What else? Trust. We already talked about this, but trust can be enacted way before death. So like a
And
will.
ongoing.
A will is a document that gets triggered on death and distributed on death. A trust, you can set things up to do all kinds of stuff now while you're alive, and there's tons of different types of trusts.
Tax advantages.
There's
to do
a
that.
lot of advantages, a lot of different reasons for a trust. Way more powerful on the asset side.
Yes,
But
but they don't inform anything around guardianship.
correct.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so let's talk about maintaining or reasons why you would want to update your estate documents.
I mean, you got the major life changes. You get married, you start having kids, you're moving, the
Right.
birth of children. You
The
may
adoption of a child.
adoption. You may early on in your life name one person the executor to help with your affairs, and then for whatever reason life changes. Maybe they don't live near you anymore. Maybe you've fallen out of grace with them, or someone else has become closer that you would want their discernment instead of someone else's.
What other reasons would there be to update things?
Well, if your financial status changes a little bit,
Or a lot of it.
or a lot of it, usually the case. But yeah, changes in financial status, and we also know what that ends up bringing on too. From all those things, but changes in assets.
Early on, I mean, you might say, humble beginnings, whatever, and you're like, here's how I want things handled. And then if your life changes in some regard financially, or a lot of it financially,
and
you're like, well, no, this person, I think, can't handle it by themselves. Too much responsibility. Now you have to start bringing in third parties. And that's a gradual thing. And that's why it's so hard to keep in your mind we need to update this. We've hit this plateau or this level of asset growth or whatever it is, or wealth. And you're like, well, now's the time you'll never think that.
No.
Because you're always chasing for the next level to get to. You're not thinking, hey, once I hit here, I need to update my documents.
Well,
Here's maybe not even a document. I think something that people get trapped in is that I don't have enough to need a will or a trust. Like I don't have enough assets for anyone for it to matter. And I would kind of going over just what we've talked about already. Like I think everybody, if you've got anybody in your life that's going to have benefit when you do pass, I think it's very important to have some documents.
Some things that a lot of times, like if somebody inherits money, we take for granted that sometimes they may. We talk about having assets and having a business. You inherit money from somebody who had those things, and you don't have them. Sometimes you don't know what to do or how to handle it, and you lean on these things, and that's why you have to. Another reason to go get it. But I see sometimes people go through a divorce, and their knowledge in this area, they need it even more, but they don't know how to go and do it.
Yeah.
And then if you inherit, it comes out of you from left field. You may not realize, and especially somebody different from your dad that may have passed away sooner, and it wasn't expected, and they just weren't prepared. And sometimes that's when, hopefully they're watching this video, but those are the two that I find people ask the most questions that they're just not expecting.
So there's a couple other things we wrote down here, like legislative changes and most importantly, periodic reviews. And I'd say one of the best practices that you can have is, every 3 years, just put something on your calendar, like do it today. If you haven't reviewed your estate planning documents in 3 years or longer, set up an appointment. Come in and talk to us. Get on the phone with an attorney. Do something. If you
just pull them out and look at them.
If you have done something in the last couple of years, then set an appointment 3 years out, a reminder, something on your calendar that says, hey, I need to set a review, and it can just be as simple as just reading your documents. It doesn't have to be a huge deep dive, but it needs to be like, who are the importance? And the best thing to do, if you have all your documents together, you should have a summary page that lists the important things. Like, this person is this person's this. Like, here's the law firm, whatever. When you do your review, make sure the law firm's still around, right?
Yeah.
Is this person, this executor, this whoever, are they still the person I want? So your summary page of your state docs should list the most important things. And every 3 years or so, 2 years, 1 year, make sure that everybody that's listed on that makes sense. And then maybe every 3 years, when you're looking on your documents, have an attorney look it over, and then like have your kids grown up. Is your family bigger? You know, just things need to be added. Are there more bank accounts that need to be listed? Whatever. Like,
Have there been any major legislative changes? Because I know that the previous, or I shouldn't say no, but I feel pretty confident that the last administration and this administration looked at estate planning very differently. And I know that
there's a sunset
couple
provision that's about to trigger here real soon.
and I know that a lot of estate planning attorneys have been very busy trying to get a lot of documents in order before that provision hits. I'm not familiar with it, but I know that they've been busy.
So 2 other things that we want to bring up real quick, and then we want to get into the next thing. We're camping out on estate planning. Is things that are so easily overlooked. And this one that when we started discussing it really popped off the table here because it's digital assets. So it's like the big thing here was like online passwords.
I was thinking Bitcoin. If you can't get back into your wallet, it's gone.
It's gone.
Correct.
I mean, that scares me.
Yes.
I don't know.
Nobody will ever get it.
Yeah.
Basically, you could have we have clients that have lots of money in Bitcoin. And if they don't pass on those assets and have access, give somebody access, it's like those assets never existed.
Yep.
So, but the passwords were really, really important to me. Making sure you have a place that stores passwords that's encrypted, whatever, that you can give to your spouse, your kids, whoever, that, you know, you're really the only one that knows probably how to get wherever you get online. Nobody else does. So having a place that you can say, hey, if anything happens to me, just, you know, it's on our browser, it's in our phone, whatever, just go here. I have like 1,800 passwords that I've accumulated online.
Hackers are like that. They'll accumulate.
Yeah, I was
a lot
gonna
of
say,
stuff.
is that just
Said hackers are like that. Everything they break
That's quite a
into,
few.
they'll
Yeah. But I save every one, and I have it all online. Like, my wife can go into all of them. She wouldn't remember the name of the program, but she would know where to click.
Oh.
You know, Brian he'd like, oh, no, I know where get wherever. I mean, you all know what I use. So, you know, there are companies
Find
out there
that stores those passwords.
I use a program called LastPass, but there are dozens of programs out there that you can store passwords. You can put them on little thumb drives to security. However you want to do it, it's just really important. And probably the most important thing that you need to do when your plan is updated is communicate. Take action. You know, you'd be like, hey, my spouse died, or my daughter got divorced, you know, or heaven forbid, my child passed away and we have this in-law. You know, like what you might think, hey, I'm doing my review, things need to change. The communication, you have to go back to your attorney and things have to get updated. You can't just go, hey, I need to work on that. They have to get done.
Yes.
And it's really important. We have something at our house we call the Survivor's Guide. That, you know, this is where the will is. This is where our trust is. We have 5 life insurance policies, things like that. Because when one of my friends' dad died, 6 months later, she said, hey, I found another life insurance policy. Because
you
don't know, you don't know.
Yeah. And it's on you to let the insurance company know.
That's right.
Hey, they've passed.
Because think about how difficult that is for a child after the parents die.
Yeah.
You got the emotional drain of it. Plus, now you got to try to find out where everything is and take care of all of the things.
Yep.
So last thing, since we're going to talk about emotions here, is something that I've told clients to do for decades now. Everything that we've talking about here on estate planning is just the legal stuff. It's the flow of what happens. You know, with Charlie's comment on, you know, the survivor's guide, it's just a binder that has, you know, the summary. It
helps. This is what I want said at my funeral. I want to have it here. I want to be just all kinds of details.
And it can just be
just pass it on.
Couple pages. But in addition to that, you know, I've always suggested my clients write letters to the people that they care the most about. If you're a single person and you have a young child, and there might be situations that you're not around for, like their first home, graduation of college, first baby, milestones in their house. You can write a letter for every single one of them in the event that you're not around to experience it. And if you are, how amazing would it be? Hey, I wrote this letter for you 10 years ago. I'm here to experience it, but this is what you would have got if I wasn't. It's heavy. Like, I get it. This is not easy, but it's amazing. And I've had several of our clients do it, and they've written all kinds of letters. And these are the things I got inspired because my grandpa left me one. And he did a really cool thing. I don't want to get into details because I'll cry. But
you could have some fun with it too, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't, like, yes, it's a heavy topic, but knowing that, hey, maybe I get to actually share this and experience it with them.
Well,
you can
but
have some fun,
and there's
right?
the two thoughts are, it's the things you never want people to forget. That's what you put down. But there's something that I just asked my parents to do. I got this idea from C12. I approached my parents and I'm like, I don't want any more gifts. Like I'm at the point where, like, my wife can't even buy me. Like, what do you want? A hug. Like a weekend away with you.
Yeah.
And we're having a conversation with my parents about it, and I'm like, you know what you could do? Get a notebook and write down all the things that I don't know about you. Stories you've never told me, things that could inspire me, struggles you've gone through that we haven't talked about at length. Like, give me those nuggets that I watched you live, but we never talked about. That would mean a lot to me, and that's what this is the outside, this is the estate planning that's not estate planning, this is the legacy planning, the stuff that you care the most about. So it's the letters, and it's the stories and insights that you can leave that nobody wants to ever forget. It's the things that made you who you are and why people love you so much.
Maybe a couple good recipes if you're talking about my parents.
Sure.
Yeah. Why
Just sitting
not?
here thinking maybe I gotta tighten that up.
We hope you all got inspired, because that's, you ask your parents,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Their
that would
legacy.
be-
What do they want their legacy to be, and how do you carry it out?
what do you want to teach me that I don't know yet? And I'm
Yeah.
an adult.
But Kyle was going there before, but I will, just unfortunately losing my best friend in a car accident, you don't know when the end is going to be. And one of the things that I hold on to is she always knew that how much I cared, right?
Yeah.
And so often when you're writing that note, and I think might be where you were going, while you're writing that note, if there's something that you're writing that you are not 10,000% sure that your loved ones know, you may want to make a phone call or make a stop by their place and make sure they know it. And then sure, you can remind them, they can see it in a note or whatever, but I don't know. That just made me think of that. And I thought that's where you were going, but that got a little deep for me, because best case is they stay, but maybe they even hear something that maybe you don't need to wait until, you're past for them to hear.
So we got a lot more to go.
I was going to say, sorry about that.
Break here, or should we keep going? I don't know how long we've gone. Let's see if we can sneak this in. We'll talk about one more, and then we're probably going to have to break and do the next another one. Oh, wow. We gone 35 minutes? Maybe.
Who's going to listen to us this long? I don't know.
Yeah,
You
let's
better
just
stop
break
there,
now.
dude.
So we're gonna cut this into a couple part series. Don't want to keep you for 3 hours today. But
In case you
the next
ran out of tissue box.
Yeah, the next one
We'll
we're
let
going
you
to talk
refill.
about is going to be, we're going to try to sneak in a couple beneficiaries. This is a big one. This is actually what started the whole thing, and helping you better understand, it's more than setting your beneficiaries on a piece of paper. It's understanding what accounts, you're almost forced to set up beneficiaries when you open it, and what accounts you don't even think about having. And we'll have lots of stories on that. And then again, having a cadence for review and things like that. But beneficiaries is big. Then we're going to jump into accountability, follow through, for goal setting, fulfillment, and purpose. And then we're going to end on lifestyle, income, and retirement planning, which we should all be ready to talk about. So until next time, thanks for watching.